like to introduce you Ico Migliore, which is first of all a friend, good friend, but of course in this case is our international guest because Ico Migliore is associate professor of design at the School of Design of Politecnico of Milan, where he have worked alongside with Achille Castiglioni, which is one of the most important name in the history of design and exhibition design here in Italy. And he is also professor in Dongseo University in Busan, South Korea. And of course, is the co-founder with Mara Servetto of Migliore and Servetto Architects, which is an office which is focalized on exhibition design. They don't do only exhibition design, of course, but we can say that the core of their activity is on exhibition design project. So temporary and permanent exhibition and museum. They have won a great number of international prize on their work, 3 or 4 Compasso d'Oro. They won so many Compasso d'Oro that I don't remember how many are. 10 or 11 Red Dot Design Awards, and so on. And of course, their work is focalized on the exhibition design as a narrative space in which they use all the kind of technologies and all the kinds of knowledge to create experience of visiting the different place and to have possibility to well-known the subject of the different exhibition they have to manage. And I think that Ico will explain to us their methodology first, and then I think he will show to us some case studies from the big number of work that they have done. And of course, you can have a site of all their works if you go on their website, where you can find all the history. So that's all for me. I'm really thanks Ico Migliore to be with us today. And Ico, it's your time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So can you hear me well? I think it's going to be about 40 minutes presentation, and I'd like to share with you my work and our work, my office and myself and Mara Servetto, and our vision in the field of exhibition design. Maybe we should start with the presentation. So I just open up. I share my screen. Right, good. Okay, so this is the title that I put is time and space morphing, because my presentation will be focused especially not on many projects. I like to summarize in 40 minutes the vision that we have in our office. We developed in the last 20 years of work, and after that I would just be more concentrated on one project that I will try to explain you more in detail, because I think it's just to better learn what is what are the different capabilities of this kind of activity. So as I said, time and space morphing are the key factor to me, and I will be focused on my speech about the time. The time is sort of I would say a material to be designed, to be redesigned and reorganized inside the space by in our work. First of all, I'd like to share with you who we are. We work mainly in, we have the office in Milano, but we also have a partner in Seoul, South Korea. As Professor Borsotti said, we have, I'm chair professor in the University of Busan at the School of Design, in which I teach interior design. And we did many things in Asia, in Korea, by the way. I think it's quite interesting. In the last 10 years, we developed many projects over there in many different fields. But of course, exhibition design, retail, interior design is one of the main field of action. We have, I would say, two main categories that I'd like to summarize here with you. One is the cultural, the other one is the branding. I think nowadays we have a sort of a continuous overlap between those two things, cultural and commercial, and cultural and branding, I would say. They overlap in the process of design. I think it's also very interesting the way you can merge those two visions. And I think this is nowadays a many opportunities will start from that. So in these two fields, of course we move in many different other fields like exhibition design, retail, interior design, installation, urban, museum, heritage. But those two main categories are the category in which we can really regroup all our work. And since our work is, I would say, a sort of a multifaceted activity, and we have a sort of a multidisciplinarity of activities, and the project direction is the main factor. But I think especially for exhibition design, what we provide to our clients is a sort of an addition of many different layers, and we have to control or manage those layers. And this, I think, is the characteristics that we have in our office. So from display to lighting to multimedia to interaction and to technology to the branding and graphic, and also going to the contents, because in this kind of a process, and you will learn later when I will go more deep and inside my project, you can understand how it's important that the designer, the architect, is involved in the conception of the content, in the develop of the contents, or also the selection with the curator. So I think it's something very interesting to know the relationship between designer, interior designer, exhibition designer, the architect, and the curatorship. So both things, they have to work very much together. And this is how we work, and how we work every day, and how we try to establish the relationship between ourselves and our clients and institutions or groups. We have developed in the last 20 years about more than 500 projects and more than 130 clients. And I think our vision is one. I mean, I summarize here our vision because I think it's important for you to know that, and that's why the subject, the title of my presentation is time, because what we think when we approach to the exhibition design, not only to exhibition design in terms of cultural, but also in a commercial exhibition design, also if you want to go even after, if you can towards the retail design. So the perfect time to us is the main subject. We want to achieve this. What does it mean, perfect time? Perfect time is something that means the involvement of the people, of the man, of the activities inside a space, what they do, what they act, how they interact. This is the readability, the experience that we say inside the space. This is the key factor to establish a sustainability in terms of this project. And I think the perfect time is something that you can reach by learning, by studying, by also experimenting relationship among objects and people. So this perfect time is something that you can really try to have in our project. Is something that we have almost like a final goal to achieve. So it's not something physical, but it's something with actions inside. And this leads to the next step. The next step is a sort of we call the new aesthetic of behaviors. Since we imagine that we always think that the center of our projects are men, are people inside the space, doing something, interacting, learning something, experimenting and knowledge, sharing creativity, sharing experiences. This kind of a aesthetic of doing things leads also to the time. So in the time you do things and you have to redesign a sort of a aesthetic of things that you do, almost like a script on theater, or the script in a movie, in a film. And this leads to the last important aspect to me, that is sustainability. Sustainability is not only sustainability in the subject of materials, of course. Of course, we have to be careful about that. But sustainability is something that has something to do with the cultural sustainability, how you can really establish a cultural interaction, something that really lead to an effective exchange of information, exchange of knowledge, between people or between contents and people. And also the financial sustainability, the aspect of how can we manage things that can be very sustainable for people to do, for people to establish relationship in those spaces. And I think in the field of exhibition design, and this is not even in temporary or even permanent exhibition, this kind of sustainability is very important, and is one other vision that other aspect that you have to really look for. The third, another aspect where we worked in many places. Of course, we were lucky to have a chance to win competition and also to have direct assignment in many countries. And this is important because especially in this kind of a field, to learn the genius loci of every place lead you to try to establish a sort of a process attitude more than a shape attitude. We design more like we approach in our project more in terms of process than in terms of shapes. I'm not very much interested in how is the final shape of the object. We do not have like a pre-idea about that, but we try to establish a really readable exchange between space and exchange between contents and people. And since we work in many countries, I think we develop a sort of a new kind of attitude in learning from spaces before doing some project. I summarize here. As I said, I'm gonna explain to you more in detail one project, which is the 22nd Triennale Pavilion for Broken Nature, the Triennale in Milano in 2019, last year, which we designed the Italian pavilion. I will go just more in detail of what we designed, because I think it's quite interesting for you to know this kind of a project. But I just summarize here some other projects just to give you the idea how the idea of the range of our activities. So this is, for instance, a project that we did we won a competition in 2010. Is a new Chopin museum in Warsaw. It's quite interesting in museum. It's a museum of music. So we had the chance to learn and a lot of things about music, but we also experimented many things in the relation between audience and people, and a different kind of a level of people, and this subject, which is the Chopin, very important artist like him, a composer like him. We also work inside the Egyptian museum. The renovation of the museum and the extension of the museum was designed was a competition that Isola Associati won in 2012, and then we were assigned as a cultural director of the museum, and I was an art director also. We designed the logo museum, we designed the whole thematic rooms, which are interesting because all room is dedicated to an era of the Egyptian and also the Egypt museum, and we designed the whole graphic environment. And as I said, I was a creative advisor for the museum for 5 years, and that was very interesting experience because we share with many people. With the curator, was a great experience, and we designed the logo. Another museum that we won a competition in 2012, and then we realized in 2016, is the Leonardiana, is the museum in Vigevano, in the castle of Vigevano, about the whole history of Leonardo da Vinci. Interesting because no one object was real. Everything was a reproduction, but everything was a sort of a pathway along his production. It was very interesting because the place is innovative, is an original place, because it's the castle of Ludovico il Moro in Vigevano, Palazzo Ducale, and inside that we had we have all the production of Leonardo. It's quite interesting, and I think you should go visit if you have the chance. This is a temporary exhibition that we designed for Max Mara. As I said, commercial and cultural, there's a sort of an overlapping, and also is an overlap of temporary and permanent. I think those two fields, they can really influence each other, and just you can have some technologies bringing from one field to another, also to activate new relationship between audience, people, visitors, and museums, and also to have the quality sometimes in temporary exhibitions, to have the quality of something that is almost like permanent for people to learn. So this is an interesting pavilion that we designed in Seoul, in the DDP's building, the big Dongdaemun Design Plaza. It was a building designed by Zaha Hadid, and inside there is a huge hall. This is the hall number 1, I can't remember. It's about 4,000 square meters, and inside we designed, there's an exhibition about Italian fashion brand, which is Max Mara, but about the whole history of course. And inside we designed this almost like a machine à montrer, sort of a museum inside an architecture within an architecture with a small. It was very interesting for the relationship, as I said, between contents and the activation of the experience that people could lead to the knowledge, the quality of this material, of these garments, and also some of the material that Max Mara has in his brand, in his company. There were about 1,000 pieces displayed there, so it was very interesting. Another temporary exhibition that we designed in 2013 is this about Picasso. It was the biggest exhibition, the most visited exhibition in Milano ever, with more than 500,000 people, visitors, and it was very big, also 3,000 square meters, the old Palazzo Reale, and there was, like, I think, almost like a pathway, very interesting, leading from a chronological vision to the idea of the creativity of Picasso, the idea how Picasso conceived Guernica, for instance. There was in Sala delle Cariatidi, there was a great reproduction of Guernica by a sort of a digital action of framing this kind of sequences that how he conceived Guernica, but at the same time more than 150 original pieces of Picasso. Was a very, very big exhibition. Recently, just this February, we were in charge with Museo Polo di Mantova of a very small exhibition, but quite interesting, very much interesting, about la Madonna Lita. Madonna Lita came from the Hermitage of St. Petersburg, the museum, and it was, in Milano after 40 years, and in Italy only for 3 months. And we displayed the whole inside Polo di Pezzoli, a very unique and peculiar museum with a very old, is an old villa, old private house transformed in a foundation. It's a very beautiful, beautiful museum, one of the, I think, most interesting small museum, not small because it's quite big, in Milano. And inside we redesigned this kind of a pathway, only leading to Madonna Lita, of course painted by Leonardo da Vinci, and all the workshop of Leonardo was displayed. It was interesting because we conceived this pathway almost like a procession, a lay procession of leading to the end to see this kind of Madonna Lita, and was also how to conceive the time of interaction, time of visit, the time of people. So it was quite interesting in a small, not very big exhibition, only 22, I think. Masterpieces, of course, of Leonardo and his pupils. We did Medardo Rosso, great exhibition in Roma, Palazzo Altemps, about sculpture. And also interesting exhibition is the Madonna della Misericordia. You know that probably every year in the city mayor in Milano, they give to the inhabitants, also to the visitors, to the guests, and also to the citizen, one masterpiece to be shown in the city hall. And there was Madonna della Misericordia by Piero della Francesca, only one masterpiece. And this was up to us to show how the conception of the painting, and it was very interesting because it was a time frame storytelling about this painting. So we conceived something that people would approach to different era, different phases of the conception of the masterpiece, and also for a sort of a guided tour, but with the control of the time. Only 15 people could meet at the open, and then after 10 or 15 minutes there is another group. So it's a sort of a loop. It's a sort of a conception of linking more this kind of exhibition to theater more than to exhibition. So it was quite interesting. A lot of people came to visit it, and it was very, very interesting because there was also a digital production by us that we add to this kind of to the original masterpiece shown there. It was interesting because there's an very old room inside Palazzo Marino, and inside we wanted to be very, very light, and there was quite interesting intervention. We also do, this is interesting for you to know that this is the installation, permanent installation that we did inside the Grattacielo skyscraper of Intesa San Paolo, Torino. Torino has a great project of Luci d'Artista, it's called Light of Artists, and they started this project 20 years ago by spreading out in the city of Torino, but just by calling many different artists, a different intervention of art inside the city at Christmas. So you have a sort of an open air museum, and I think it's quite interesting to design those areas and to visit this Torino in that period. And we were called by Intesa San Paolo to design an installation inside the skyscraper and visible from outside also, because it's the 34th floor, I can remember, but very high. And this installation is a sort of a floating installation that actually was designed to be temporary, but then they decided to keep it there, and Renzo Piano designed the building, and also he agreed with us to keep this installation. It's a sort of a light installation that established a dialogue between outside and inside. It's something that not only works with the light, but works also with the time frame of the day, from the morning up to night, and it's controlled by a computer and would interact with the outside, the condition of the outside. I think it's quite interesting. And other project, of course, the installation. This is a temporary installation that we did during the last furniture fair in Milano. There is, at the Università Statale di Milano, interni, they promote many installations. We were called to design this pavilion last year. Nowadays, we are working in the Museum of Compasso d'Oro. We won the competition 5 years ago. This is quite a long time ago, but finally we are working inside this museum. It's a very interesting place. It's the XNL area. Is an ongoing process, and it's about 3,000 square meters. It will be the Museum of Compasso d'Oro Adi, which is the prize, an award, very big, important award that in the field of design, but not only design, graphic, and there was created by Gio Ponti, and it's quite important. And they have many. Of course, this is going to be a sort of a museum of design, which include in the last 60 years of selection of this prize, this award that is continuously going on. Sorry. This is the rendering. We are working inside the area right now. This is the logo that we designed also with Italo Lupi. Italo Lupi is a great master. He's a designer. He used to be editor-in-chief of Abitare. He was art director of Domus. And we worked together in many projects. And this is the logo that we designed together for this Adi Design Museum. Of course, I show you this because, of course, in the field of exhibition design, the relationship between spaces, graphics, and many other layer of design are very much together, and you have to manage not only by designing yourself, but to manage to know that everything should be controlled by the designer, by the architect. So let's start about this subject, the main subject, which is time. I just published in the end of last year, 2019, this book that is called Time to Exhibit, which is about directing spatial design and new narrative pathways. This is a sort of a book about our theory, not only theory, but our, how we apply the theory, how we could summarize our projects and our research in the field of exhibition design. And you can find there many different kind of possibility to understand how the whole process of exhibition design is so, to me, so attractive and so enthusiastic, because it established a very important relationship between the culture and people. So, and the time is the subject that we stress. I think in this book you can find also reference of the masters, Albini, Castiglioni, Carlo Scarpa, but at the same time we also you can find inside the book of course, our case histories, our work, and how is the relationship between the work and the theory, and I think how the process to understand the process of design inside this kind of this field. And design is a matter of speed and time. I think this is something that I like, that I wanted to share with you, the main aspect that I wanted to share with you in this my short conversation. So I'd like you to start thinking that every time we design something, every time we design, we draw with a pen, a line, we draw speed and time. Because if we have people to do something, that's why we want to have the people center inside our projects. If we think about space and people, then you have to add time and speed. And it's quite interesting to know, because after that, you really can succeed in having like sustainability, as I said, not in terms of material, but in terms of the quality of your messages, the quality of the relationship that you establish. And also, it's quite interesting to know that if speed is what results from time, the space needed in interior design raises as the speed increases. Just if you just start thinking about that. The fast food are big because you go fast, or even the signs in the freeway, in the highway, when you in your car, your exit is very big. In the store, the exit, the sign is very small because you have time. You don't go so fast. So anytime you have to go fast, anytime you have to read fast, anytime you need to understand, you have to put too many people, more people. You need more space, not only because you need more density, but you need to be fast. And this is how you completely can change the perspective of your design, your project. In fact, you have to know how fast people do things. How fast can a man learn? How fast can a man read? How fast can you memorize something? It's not just a joke, but it's something that if you do not really understand the time of doing something, the time of interacting with something, then your message would be perceived with a good quality, with a high quality. You imagine also in movies, how without having the quality of the timing, the quality of the editing of the movie, it's you understand or you don't understand the story. And inside this book, you can find those, I would say, design elements that I summarize here, just to give you the idea. And inside the book, you can find more in detail what is the subject of those different elements. Of course, light and shadow, meaning the light is very important. The pathway is critical, and is for each of these design element as a sort of a category of different other selection of subjects to be divided inside. But the pathway is not only the physical pathway, but it's the pathway of readability, the pathway of mental pathway. So you have to really, inside those elements, you can put those together. The frame, what is the frame? The conception of not only the frame that frame the paintings, but the frame is the box, the architecture, and also the density. The density is very important. Among the density, you can decide how many people do something, and of course nowadays we can understand. But it's not only because of coronavirus, which is not important in this subject, but it's important how we can really take care of understanding the density, the capability of people to learn many things together. And putting this together, those four elements together with time, then we move to this. We design, what we do inside our spaces, we design sequences. So we redesign sequences. We design, we establish the relationship between people and contents by designing sequences and objects and devices that help us in establishing the relationship between contents and people. That's why, as I said, spatial editing is the other aspect. By time and space should be designed by the designer, the architect, and the designer should be conceived as a director, connecting curatorship and project design. So we design that. As a designer, we need to control, to manage all these things together in a sort of a very big, complicated project somehow, with many professionalities, leading to have this kind of a final effect of knowledge sharing. We design sharing spaces. Without this kind of capability of sharing our ideas, and without the capability of editing the space, we are not able to achieve our final goal. So we design what? We design patterns. we design patterns. This is an exhibition that I had in South Korea with my students. We designed together different patterns, and I think the pattern is because this pattern should be conceived as readability, as I said, movement, fast activation of things. And I think it's quite interesting to start understanding that those not only layers but patterns, pattern of knowledge, pattern of light, pattern of graphic, pattern of experience, and I think it's quite interesting. The other aspect that we can develop, and I think I advise you to try to lead anytime to achieve anytime you design something in this kind of a field, is the possibility to go in and out the perspective of your contents, and also leading from zooming in and out the subject main of the exhibition. People, they can browse not only in one way, but in many different ways. There are different level of people, there are different interests of people, and I think through this kind of we have to manage this kind of approach by designing this kind of a zoom in and out, and how we work inside the space. Okay, now there are almost, I would say, two. I would just to summarize what I say about space editing, and when I say something about narrative things, I have those two categories that nowadays I can explain you. The museum nail is called the museum, sort of a nail on the wall, and the museum fanfare is the other vision that we have nowadays. So we have this kind of like the museum is not. The museum nail is something not empathy at all, with no empathy. The people, they visit with the hand in their pocket, and they visit, almost like, small labels with small chapters, small information about the arts. And on the other hand, we have this kind of fanfare museum, which I do not agree either, is something that is almost like a toy for kids. Lighting, they call experience, but it's no experience. You just only perceive with you're invaded by light, by projections. And I don't think this is quite, it could be something very narrative or very, I would say, with the man in the center. The third aspect something that we want to achieve is a sort of a new narrative museum. New narrative museum is something that is put not the contents at the center, but the visitor. The visitors are in the center with a sort of a full environment dedicated to them. So the experience is concentrated of people, not on objects. So it's not a conservation. Even the new museums, they're not conceived in a sort of a conservation way. But we need to design spaces in which we establish the time, the actions, what people do, how much time people they spend there, how much time they have to learn something, how they can be guested in a different way. It's a matter of hospitality. We should have them guests in our spaces and let them know that they can use the space as a sort of a prothesis to establish a new relationship between their body and the knowledge, the contents in the space. To finish, I want to go to this project that I like I showed you many big projects but this is I selected this project because it's quite interesting for its density. This project was done last year in it's quite small, it's in a pavilion, but it's quite dense, very interesting. The way I think the process of this was Broken Nature, in Triennale, and only 100 square meters, 90 square meters. We were included in this very big exhibition. There was a big expo about problem of the world, and it was sort of a collection. It was a group with many countries. All the country came there, and every country was represented by excellences. There were MIT, VNA, Dongseo University, many very institutions to present their research and their work in the field of innovation to help the world to go better. And Politecnico was selected as one of the most important school in Italy, and the most important, I would say, scenario of activities, because from engineer to architecture to design, creativity and research are mixing together. And it was very interesting to work together. It was very dense group of people, dense group of contents. And we were also, myself, I was a curator. With my team, we also were the designer, of course, designers of the exhibition, and the graphics and everything. But it was a very big group of people. And the interesting thing is how we conceived this pavilion from the beginning to the final display. And in this, you can really understand to me how the contents, the time, and the interaction is important in this project. Just for you to understand. So, you know, Politecnico, 6 months, 90 square meters, you know, of course, the Triennale di Milano was a big event from March to September, 21 international participants, thematical exhibition, and the mission was to have this kind of a broken nature. Design takes a human survival. Paolo Antonelli, the curator of design of MoMA, was the general curator of the exhibition. And every country was called to represent their best works in this very important field for the future of the world. Polytechnic was selected. We wanted to communicate this kind of a quality of Polytechnic, the history, the number, the people, and the know-how. But how to do it was the main subject. And we wanted also to put this, the Polytechnico, the thinking, what the idea, how we can be like a multidisciplinary, as I said, the creativity, the innovation. So we selected actually the curator. I curated the pavilion with very important curator, Federico Bucci, you know, the pro-rector, of course, was a curator, Luisa Collina, Donatella Asciutto, and Marco Bocciolone were the curator with me. And Federico Bucci decided also to propose to have 4 elements taking care, to establish this kind of relationship between, of course, the four elements that we have, and how earth, fire, water, and air are main subject of research and project in Polytechnic. But the main problem was how to display them in a very small pavilion like that. And the idea was to start to thinking about like IMSS. The IMSS, they had this very beautiful film that I advise you to see. They did it, I think, in 1961, is about, you know, the powers of 10, just by adding, moving inside and out our atmosphere, inside and out our space, the space in general. And that was the main idea, to have like from micro to macro, and to present all the projects from Politecnico of the project in the same sort of a, I would say, very democratic way. It was a very big 400 people were involved in this project, and the idea was to have a pavilion to be browsed, to be touched. Since we couldn't bring in 100 meters many very big project or even small project. But how was the selection? We wanted to bring as much as possible. So we decided to have 41 display projects and 400 people involved, and we selected 41 projects among many. But each project was designed in a way that I try to explain you here. So this is the final room, and the idea was to have the room by three main categories. One is the physical, Politecnico Wunderkammer. At the end of this room, we selected about, I would say, 50 masterpieces of Politecnico, but object, a sort of object and real things, paintings, scale models, drawings by great architects, great engineers, great designers in the 150 years. And we put those elements in one wall that we call the Politecnico Wunderkammer, with the room of the wonders, of course. And then the other was a sort of a grid, structural grid, which is a sort of a cage, metallic cage, that from micro to macro would, you know, sustain, would present the rest of the exhibition. That was conceived on 8 oversized books of volume, big books and volume that people could browse and could interact with. And in the center, we had the third part, which is a sort of a central installation. This installation would tell the story of the problems, and is a sort of a hole, because with 2 opposite mirror was a sort of an infinite hole inside the Triennale, and just by a sort of holographic projection, water, air, fire, and earth, they present their problems and almost like crossing all the scenario and all the exhibition area. This is a map that I always design like that. I try to summarize at the end of the project or during the process what we do, what we have inside. And I think it's interesting for you also to know that sometimes architecture drawing are not enough. When you have to design a space like an exhibition, you need to add more like sequences. You need to add sketches of scenarios in which what do you expect, and that you have to design light, you have to design music, you have to include smell, touch, something that is very difficult to establish only in an architectural drawing. So that's why I think it's important to understand that how we try to explain the message that we try to put inside. That's when I was mentioning before how to design the time. It's quite complicated, but if you design scenarios, if you design sceneries, if you design those kind of maps, and then you can start to understand how it goes. This was the original plan. It's quite, as I said, it's quite simple as a structure. It's a sort of big room, but inside the actions and the pathway is quite interesting, because you starting from book number 1 to book number 8, you go from Earth and cosmos, very big, to micro and nanotechnology, very small. So people they had the chance to learn and to browse inside just by touching those books. They were interactive books. Those books you can touch from those books and learn, have information through video or through other action that I show you after. And the ideas was also because it's very important that every time that you design something, every time that you design a museum, every time you design an exhibition, it's not only the effect that you have in that exhibition, it's something that you can do is a sort of a slow release effect. When people visit the exhibition, visit your museum, they cannot get everything from what you display. They can have like the touch and the experience of what they would like to do after. And if it's in a museum, is the good thing is they come back. If it's a temporary exhibition, they can by themselves lead them to succeed or to learning something that they want to know better. So I think a museum is a sort of a trigger. Exhibitions are a trigger through which you can learn and start a new passion, and also you can establish the quality, the consistency of our heritage, of our culture. So this is a metallic grid of the cage. As I said, we went from micro to macro, but it's also to put the people try to drag them in a new dimension, to be more aware, to understand the physicality of the space change because of the perception, and then and then maybe you wake up yourself, your attention, and you read inside the space in a different way. There was a suggestion, of course, this is Bernini, of course, this Palazzo Spada, and the idea of having this kind of accelerated perspective lead the people to have inside a sort of a trompe-l'oeil for them to see that. So this was the structure. The structure was necessary, of course, to suspend those kind of books, and those books were very democratic, from big to big project to small project in terms of size. They were included in this kind of a pathway that you can browse freely, and they can browse freely inside the idea. What they do, they have the chance to touch. Of course, we are in very moment now in which we cannot touch, but I think we will touch soon, hopefully, the world. We are a bit afraid now to touch, but this is important to be there. It was very important for people to touch and activate. Just by touching and activating, they were selecting things, almost like, you have a private visit in a collective space, and then you can do something else. So I think this is a sort of, actually this was a sketch how to interact. There was a sensor, proximity sensor, and we designed those kind of big pages, translucent pages, put in front of the backlight, of the littered backlight frame, and then towards that you can read. You had the chance to read the contents, but at the same time, just by moving and sliding those pages, you had the chance to activate the video. in this I would say displayer. And everyone was quite interested because the addition of that was as I said, very democratic, and also the time for that. You had the time to read, and at the same time you have the time to understand through the video. Each video was only 30 seconds, 40 seconds to understand what was the subject, and you can. That was quite interesting. Those are the fiberglass. No, those are not fiberglass. Those are plexiglass slabs, and this was the idea of what we had. It was a system, very simple system of proximity sensor for people to touch and to activate this kind of interaction. This is a prototype. Anytime you do something like that, you need to, of course, to try to prototype the device. And in this case was quite interesting because then we decided not to have the bottom part. Everything was suspended, and you can see here during the assembling. The third is interesting because this kind of this is of course temporary, but this kind of a temporary lead you to something permanent because the research, the activity, the timing, the addition of sound, of interaction, of lighting is something we have this. We can experiment that, and we can move when we do something permanent in the permanent museum. This is the central installation, and the central installation was about, as I said, the problem of our planet: earth, fire, water, and air. But the projection is quite complicated, but interesting. At the end, was quite simple. It was complicated in the design, but simple at the end result because there were, holographic sheet hanging from the ceiling, and with two mirror, one on the floor, one on the ceiling. There was a sort of endless, continuously floating information, floating images where people could approach. And this, of course, also dragged the attention of the people. Then you have to think, well, while I'm entering, you almost like your right part of your brain, you can have this all together and you can perceive all this together, but then deeply you can go inside those books and you can understand what is the subject of the research, what are the categories, what are the main contents to be provided for this exhibition. So it's a sort of, something is in loop and something is activated by individuals. So you had the chance to spend, let's say, 15 minutes or 40 minutes inside to learn and browse. That's why, because we wanted to have as much as possible loop of people inside, and also to just by give the idea of possible to continue your research in this kind of a field, and after leaving the exhibition. That was quite interesting the way we tried this projection. Of course, those projections have many different problems and characteristics, which you have to the right angle. But this is quite interesting because, of course, your project from the beginning, that was my sketch on the left from the beginning, it of course changed because of the shape, because the angles of the projection. But at the end, you see this is quite complicated in such a small pavilion. As I said, 400 people involved in the curatorship and many other people involved in the realization of this project. The interesting thing of this is everything is reusable. All this pavilion now is in Politecnico. They have the pavilion. They can reuse the components of every part, every detail of this. This is what you had the chance to see by entering this. Also, that kind of a center is a sort of a I would say translucent area in which you can have a sort of a center to make you the idea of, to give you the idea how to look inside this kind of a room. And the perspective would change, of course, because of the grid, the sort of a dynamic distances among the physical structure. The last part, of course, design that I mentioned at the beginning was the Politecnico Wunderkammer. So one part was to have all on one wall, not all, because in 150 years they have much more objects, but a selection of objects, real object, physical object. We put those objects behind a frame, a sort of a fabric, very light fabric is called Glastex. And on this fabric, just by projecting, we were adding information and light about every single object. So it was a sort of a loop, dynamic loop on what you have. So this is the dynamic loop of the history of the collection of the object, sort of a Wunderkammer. And this was like this, you had those two frames One is physical, one is, of course, the layer of projection. And with a sort of a video mapping, we were interacting between contents and physical objects. This was the realization of the final Wunderkammer. It was interesting because you had these three different levels. One was interaction, one was the browsing inside the content, one was the idea of problems in the middle, but with a sort of infinite, with endless projection floating in the middle, and at the end, the history of object, the collection of private objects. These are different levels of attraction, because also inside a small room like that, the rhythm is important, the rhythm of narration. The attention leads you to the knowledge if you attract them to the rhythm, like music. As I said, like music, like editing in film editing. When you if you do not put together and cut together frame by frame, the narration is quite incomprehensible. So at the end of this was the end of the room. We designed also a graphic book. Italo Lupi also can work with us. Design this book, was conceived the book. And also we call Emiliano Ponzi is a very interesting illustrator, and he designed this kind of illustration of the cover. There was actually the screensaver of every individual book that we had there. There was a poster, there was this. So I just want to finish with this. Okay, as I said, time was the main subject in this exhibition, the pavilion of Triennale. But as I said from the beginning, time to me is something that you can, if you start managing time, start to thinking about time, start to conceiving design as a material, as a fluid that should be adjusting its density inside spaces according to what you want to have, to what you want to achieve in terms of narration, because this is the main subject of exhibition. Then you can shape behaviors, and then the time will be the real sustainability for your project. And then this is over. Thank you.
So Ico, thank you so much for your lecture. Every time is so interesting to hear you and to know better your work. Of course, now I ask to our students have some question, because we have time for some question, and you can use directly your microphone and switch on your camera to speak with Ico. And maybe meanwhile we wait for some question, I would like to ask you something more about the relationship between.
Okay. I can also advise. I can send them the video of the. They can if they want to go on internet. I can. Rossella, could you please send them the link of the video of the Triennale? It's about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. So you can see when I'm talking about actions, you can really perceive, you can see from the video, because the video was too heavy to be presented in this speech.
Perfect.
Rossella, can you post it, please?
Yes, sure. 1 second, please.
I think you can post it directly in the chat, so it's easy to catch from everyone. And Ico, I would like to know better something about the relationship between the container and the exhibition design you make. I mean, you have shown to us many different spaces, historical spaces made for the exhibition, like Triennale, but other which are born for different use, like Palazzo Reale, and of course modern buildings like Zaha Hadid. How is the different, which are the different approach and problem in having so different field of work?
I think you should, as you mentioned inside the book that I suggest you to buy and to get, because is inside the book there is also this subject, how to interact with the background, how to interact with the space, how to really to to manage the good result, final result when you have to to work in different spaces. And I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding. Sometimes the temporary exhibitions are conceived to try to avoid the relationship between space and your exhibition. And every time we design something, we try to learn from the space, try to take advantage, even when you do like a fair, when you try to, which is quite complicated because you don't even know who's going to come beside you. But we try to learn from the space, try to learn from the quality of the space. Of course, you have to read the space, try to understand where the light comes from, where the what are the quality of the space. And this kind of matching the subject and the background is something that is very important. So every time is not to. Sometimes you can decide to avoid the space, but just before doing that, you have to understand how to learn from the space. And in many cases, it's quite inspiring to learn from the space. One thing, of course, very important is how the light will affect the light. Natural light, of course, in temporary exhibition, you cannot work with natural light because the natural light, or you can decide to work, but you need to add different process to work with natural light. In temporary exhibitions, there are possibilities, but it's quite complicated. The first problem could come from the light, and this is the natural or artificial light. And then when you understand that, you understand also the pathways. And I think also it's quite interesting to really try to learn from the space.
And listen, another thing that I find really interesting is about, of course, your idea of time in exhibition design. And as you know, it's time that I'm interested in the idea of direction, like a movie, in making exhibition design. And I always thought that in some part, exhibition design is similar to make a movie because you have to create a plot and have a script and decide the time and the characters that works in your screen, which become the exhibition. So the question is how you can manage the time as a matter of exhibition, as a material, which is the idea you got of use the time.
You're exactly. I mentioned in the beginning. We design sequences. We design sequences where people inhabited sequences. So our actors are people moving and doing things inside the space. So anytime we design something, we have to think about how much time do I have to dedicate? Do I have to activate in relation to people? So how to design space? How to design? How to manage the time is to think about different actions that people do inside. Not only thinking about hanging things on the wall just by leaving the people inside, but the action to learn something, not the action to visit. Because the idea is to transform your visit in a sort of experience, in a sort of to be conscious, to be there, to be a sort of something that lead you to a new memorable moment with a subject. Could be cultural or commercial, but at the same time the subject of time is for every subject. And if you have to think what we do, how we do inside, what they do, what the people do, how much time people stay in front of this painting, how much time do you think? And if you want, like as I said for Madonna della Misericordia, we thought about that. We activated a relationship between people and the subjects, but just by allow them to be there in the room only for such amount of time. But in that time, just by progressing towards this time and also fading in other activities in other rooms. So I think this is quite interesting. And not only, of course, it's not like you cannot, oblige them to stay only for such amount of time. As I said, during the like Triennale, the 22nd Triennale, they could stay there for as much as they wanted to. But the idea is the message. How much time for the messages? How much time do I need to learn this to the message? For how fast people can read, how fast people can learn something. And I think this is important. Nowadays, actually, is the key factor. If we want to develop the future, especially with the problem that we're going to face, you know, for this kind of a problem that we have nowadays, the time, if you design the time, you can be sustainable. You can be also sustainable in this kind of a problem, not to detach people, but to design the time between people, and to activate time between people is important, and between, you know, visitors, not only, you know, make them detached, but make them do something in between. So I think it's interesting.
I saw that there is a question from Yuhao. If you like to ask directly using your microphone, I think should be better than read. Yuhao?
Okay, Professor. There's a question that when the exhibition itself should be, present itself as a visible shape, like what you did in the Zaha's architecture. You can see that it's a concept of architecture in architecture. And the other option is when to merge into the space, like you can't see what it is, but the people that the exhibition itself is integrated into the whole space. And if we do like to show its shape and how we could do, the factors that influence the shape. Thank you.
So actually, the idea of the shape inside the shape was to present the Zaha Hadid architecture, well, not to I would say negate the architecture, but was something to deny the architecture, but was to present the space, to confront and to use the old space. Because I went in the Zaha Hadid Museum, I went to see before this exhibition that we designed, I went to see the exhibition of Louis Vuitton. There was a big exhibition, and they designed inside the same room. You had many different rooms. From the entrance, you were entering inside this, without any kind of a perception of the old space, was fully reorganized as a sort of a new room by room, very important, very big in terms of contents, but without any kind of a clue of what was the architecture, of what was the space, the surrounding. There was not, was completely denied, completely deleted, completely, because you were entering inside room by room. I thought, just by entering that room, void room, I thought, well, this is, I didn't like it. Actually, I didn't like it. I didn't like the Zaha Hadid architecture because it was, not I didn't like it, was very much complicated to design an exhibition inside. But I thought, I want to take advantage of the space, almost like working outside. And the object that we designed was open, so people could cross the object inside and outside by having area to sit outside. So it was not inside and outside. Inside was display, and outside was people to move. It's a sort of a, we call like a time machine architecture. Of course, you had the perception of and was generated by the square with this kind of a roof. With this kind of a roof was a projection. Was a projection like a mapping on the designed by a Korean artist, Yoo Young Kang, a very interesting digital artist. And we had like 7 legs, 7 branches. Each branches had 1 decade. But you can move inside freely, outside the architecture, moving inside. So the idea was connecting each decade. So it was a completely new conception of the. It was not because we wanted to have an architecture, but because we wanted to have more people dealing and moving freely among this. And I think this is why we designed that. I hope I answered your question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So I don't know if anyone has other question for our guest Ico. Otherwise, I think that there is a question I have to ask you in reason of our time. So what you think should be the future of exhibition design in pandemic time? Because this is one of the most discussed theme by now, because we don't know exactly how to manage our museum, our cultural heritage, our exhibition in reason of social distance and things like this. Do you think that this could change something in our field?
I think, I think so. I think that now we are working, as I said, in many museums. We're working also in Genova. Genova, there is a city museum that we are now working in these days. And we are now redesigning the pathways and storytelling in relation to this problem. But I think this problem is something that allows us to rethink about the quality of messages. We should redesign the quality of interactions. We should not only take this problem as a problem. We should take this problem as a chance for us to transform in opportunity. We should redesign the opportunity of experiment. For instance, I'm also working with many other museums, and my idea, our idea, not my team idea, is to work more in small addition of many messages. Instead of a big museum, many small museums are together. If you think about that, with less people inside, they can move from one museum to another. Then you can manage the storytelling. Almost like we should go to a museum now, like we go to a cinema for 40 minutes. Doesn't make sense to stay 5 hours inside Louvre. It doesn't make any sense. Why? First of all, you do not understand anything because too many things to learn. Second is you have to, maybe you should have a ticket with many possibility to enter, maybe a ticket for 5 times inside a museum, and you enter, you exit the museum, or you have many entrances, or you have a storytelling, as I said, for like Madonna Lita. Small, 30 minutes, you can learn a lot, and you go home and you learn something. You can pick more picking than should be like in the past. I think museums and exhibitions, they were conceived like a massive, we should spread out the culture. Not having only one place as a magnet, but spread out the culture. And by doing that, we can really learn more, and we can establish a better relationship between the audience and the people. For instance, doesn't make sense to have too many masterpieces in one room. To me, no. It's much better to have one. If I have 50 pieces of a great master, let's say Van Gogh, and on one wall I put 49 pieces, and on the other wall I put one, everyone think, oh, this is the most important, just by entering the room. But maybe we didn't have space to fit 50. But nowadays, I think we should be much more focused on the storytelling and to control the time. That's why I wanted to stress. Maybe it was very fast, my presentation, but if you can control the time, you can control the sustainability. If you can control the time, you can control pandemia, you can control the people. Not only waiting people, queuing people, but people, they should do something while they're queuing. So extend the museum, extend the visitors in many different activities. They say we shouldn't have we should have more exhibition during pandemia, more small exhibitions, so people, they can visit. They can, and I think we should, and also we have the capability in Italy, and I think this is important. We have nice weather in a certain amount. We can use the outdoor space, use more the outdoor space for culture. Bring the outdoor space, bring culture outside. We all have it, but bring more. Interact inside and the outside of the building. Should negotiate more for the quality of the messages. And I think this is a key factor, and I'm working on that nowadays. I'm working in Genova for the museum. It's an open museum where people, they can in and out, they can move in and out, they can a sort of a cultural trekking around the city. So I think this is important, and it's something that for me will help us in designing better museums. I do not believe in plexiglass between people. It's horrible. I don't believe in plexiglass. I do not believe in dots on the floor because distances. People, they know the distances, but you have to tell them the story in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes, in 30 minutes. Then they can understand. Then they leave, and then like in the past, going to cinema.
Thank you. I totally agree with you, but it's always my desire to have the chance to meet you again face by face. because it's so many times we didn't meet each other. And I think we have used all your time, and thank you so much for have been with us today. And there are no other questions, so thank you again for your presentation. Thank you again for your lecture, and thank you again for the indication of the other exhibition and the book. And of course, see you soon for our occasion.